Welcome.
Welcome.
Today we're talking about why we get so tripped up in relationships, needs versus strategies.
Yes, that's a hot topic.
It is. I'm really excited to dive into this topic today. So why don't you kick us off by sharing our definition of needs?
Okay. The definition that we work with actually comes out of nonviolent communication, which is like a method or a way to think about how you communicate, developed by this wonderful man called Marshall Rosenberg. And his book, we should put it in the show notes, let's not forget, is called Nonviolent Communication, or Compassionate Communication might be these days, A Language for Life. And it's such a great read, full of stories. And he's laying out the simple, it's not very complicated, but it's deep method for how we can really change how we communicate and just make it much healthier and much more generative and even regenerative, healing, in fact.
Yes.
And so I've used NVC a great deal in my life, in my personal life, but also in my coaching. And I've done a number of trainings in NVC, and I use it. I train other people, and I use it extensively wherever I go. I've also built upon it in a lot of ways, because it's been a great foundation for how to build an anatomy of this inner realm and an anatomy of the social realm in particular. And so NVC really gives us a shared language. And so now I'm going to sort of dive into a definition of needs, which is a really great example of now it's a shared language that we can use in which we can talk about our inner experience.
Yes.
And so this whole episode is going to kind of be walking you through that. So we're excited about that. Okay. So definition of needs. A need is something that you need, and obviously, but a need is something that any human being on this planet who is obviously not a baby, but a child can connect to and understand. Doesn't matter what culture you come from, doesn't matter what language you come from, it is universal. That's a part of its definition. You could also call it an archetype. For instance, the need for compassion. Or the need for connection, need for love, a need for recognition, a need for safety or autonomy, independence. There's a lot of words. These are obviously words in English, and I do believe that Marshall Rosenberg's work has been translated into many different languages. And another thing we should have is a list of needs words from the English language.
Yeah,
can we have
a list.
We do. Okay, so we'll have that. Yeah. So you can take a look at that and see. So the other aspect of these beautiful universal needs is that they are beautiful, true, and good. They are not dysfunctional. They are not problematic. They are a beautiful part of who you are as a human being. That you have needs.
So there's not like the need to control everyone around me.
That's
is not
a need.
Included.
That's not a need.
Yes.
That's a strategy. So
there's an inherent goodness.
There's an inherent goodness in the need for connection and love and independence and all these kinds of words. And I just want you to just hold that as a definition for now, and you can try it out for yourself. As we massage this concept of needs, you can see for yourself that they are inherently good and beautiful needs.
And nothing to be ashamed of.
Nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. You don't need to suppress them, even though we all do, because we believe that we can't get our needs met. But we're going to get there. But let's just hold this idea, or this idea that needs are good. As very important, and I hope that you'll understand why by the end of this episode. Welcome to Magenta FM, a show for people who aspire to deeper, richer, and more healthy ways of being in community, in leadership, and in relationship with others. I'm Louisa Barnum.
And I'm Rachel Hazlett-Carr.
So the cool thing about this word and its definition, the word needs and its definition, is that we can start to build a shared language about how we're going to talk about this invisible, intangible inner realm of our inner experience, and of the invisible, intangible realm of the spaces between us in communication and relationship. We've got to have an anatomy. We've got to have a taxonomy. We've got to have a shared language with which to navigate.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's move on to strategies. Why is strategies part of this conversation? And what do we mean by that?
Yeah. So a strategy is what we do or what we say, which is another way of saying what we do, to try and get a need met that we have. So we have a need, but we use a strategy to meet it. And it's really important that we differentiate between these two things. What I have observed over the years is that people conflate these two things. And they think that what their need is actually their strategy that they think that they need to use in order to get the need met. They don't realize that it's just a strategy. And in fact, there's a world of problems in the realm of strategy and a world of hurt, because very often we believe there is only one or two strategies that we are allowed to use, the only ones we can even think of, the only ones that we believe that are available to us to meet a particular important and beautiful and true need that we have. And this is where we can get into a trap. This is something that is really interesting. I don't know if we want to go there, but infidelity is a really interesting area of relationships to study, because I have worked with a number of people who were struggling with infidelity at the time we were working together, either because they were the ones who were
Having an affair?
Yes, thank you. Or they were on the receiving end of their partner having an affair. So I've kind of seen the gamut there, the range. And that infidelity is a very good example of, it's the only strategy that I know to try and get my need met for connection and love, or whatever their need is. They don't realize that there are about 1 million other strategies that they could have used, but because of their family patterns that they were unconscious that they had inherited, they thought it was the only one that they had. So
they didn't have any other
They didn't
tools.
know that there were other ways.
Yeah.
So it's very sad and unfortunate, and it's very destructive strategy.
Yeah. A lot of times it's the nail in the coffin strategy.
Yes.
That really is the final ending point of a relationship.
Yeah, you're never going to have the same marriage, but maybe you might want to build a new one, or maybe not, once there's been infidelity.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the end of the marriage, but it's the end of the marriage as it was.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think the reason you're bringing it up is because we don't often think about infidelity that way.
No.
It's just looked at as a poor
something
choice.
evil. Yes.
Yeah. Something
really bad, and somebody's done something terrible. And maybe that's true, but the honest, in my experience, is never that simple.
Yeah. It's a strategy to meet
and a very, very important need. So yeah,
well, there's some other strategies we can share through. You just went like,
I'm sorry, that's a
good.
really
that
big deal.
You know, made shock people a little bit.
Yes, sorry about that, but yes.
Okay, so a not as intense, you know, of a strategy is complaining about things. So that's one that I'm guilty of.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
tell me about that.
If I can notice myself complaining about something,
like what would you say?
Oh, like when you come home, the house looks so great, and when I come home, it's the kitchen's a mess and the dishes aren't done, and that just leads to disappointment, and then a response, you know, a natural response of defensiveness or anger, and the need that I'm feeling, like support in holding the household, which is a big conversation to hold
right.
with your partner,
right?
When And it needs to be held in a time when you're not in a place of resentment.
Right. And it also speaks to expectations.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you come home with certain expectations.
Yes.
And they're not met.
I shared in an early episode, maybe the first episode,
Yeah.
a theme of disappointment.
Yeah.
And really that comes from having an expectation that is unspoken.
Unspoken.
Yeah. Or making agreements that are not really...
Realistic, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Uh-huh.
Let's share some other stories of strategy before we really dive into the healthy way to go about
for sure.
getting the need met. Like for, support in the household. That's a really good example especially mothers and other people, need to have those conversations.
Yeah.
But what are some other strategies that we employ to meet a need that we're not conscious of? Well, really everything we do is a strategy to meet some need. We're constantly employing strategies to meet needs.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what comes up in me is motive.
Yes.
So often when we employ these strategies, we're not aware of our motive. And what I mean by that is, let's say we have a need. We're scared to ask to get that need met. So in a quite unconscious way, we'll try to set up the conditions in which we'll get our need met in more sneaky ways. For instance, let's say we have a need for someone to notice something, but we don't want to have to tell someone that they have to notice something. So what we'll do instead is emote. We'll broadcast strong feelings that we're unhappy. And the family will, or whoever, will start to revolve around the fact that we're emoting, but we don't say what it is that the problem is. And we basically force other people to guess. They know we're upset. We know we're upset. Everyone knows that we're upset. And so we start to create a bit of a vortex around us, and we get what we want, which is attention. So we use our emotions and emoting, as I call it, as a way of getting attention. Or another way of getting attention that we need is to act out. So, you can often see in children certain behaviors that are really, really annoying, and they get what they are after, which is attention.
Yeah.
It's just a really unfortunate strategy, right? Just so...
or yelling at somebody.
Yeah.
Yelling at your partner.
Yes.
When you're really deep down wanting connection, needing connection.
You're needing connection, you're needing attention, you're needing some time together. And what do? You yell at them. And so this is another principle. I'm just going to touch on this really briefly because it's a deep dive and it's pretty advanced. But the concept is reversal. So when we first start to get to know our strategies to try and meet a need, what often we do is we employ strategies that get us the opposite of what we need, reversal. I don't know exactly, I can't explain to you exactly why this is. It's just a phenomena that I have observed over and over again to such a degree that I'll even use it as a tool. It's part of my toolkit. So what we'll do is we'll conflate, as I said earlier, needs and strategies into one bundle of confusion. And as we start to tease those apart and say, okay, what you're talking about is a strategy, but it's not what you need. Tell me what you need. And then we'll start to get into it. And then they'll discover that, and this is a part of my guidance through them, because I know this to be true, that their need is the opposite of what their strategy was trying to engineer. And that's how we find out what they need.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so let me just give you another, I'm sorry, this is a rather extreme example, and I keep coming up with extreme examples, but sometimes we really can discover the subtle by studying the extreme. Another extreme example is overachievers. So if this is an experience that you've had, or you know someone who's an overachiever, don't take what I say as a sort of blanket judgment, because everyone is so unique. But what I have often seen in overachievers is that it is the only strategy that they know to get a particular need met. And this need is deep and buried. And it's a need for love. And it's a need for something that is fundamental to us all. In fact, if you're familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I can't remember what's on the very bottom, but recognition should be on the bottom. It's like even more important than food. It's not. But I'm trying to make a point, right?
Yeah.
Recognition is like God created humans so that God could be recognized. It's that important. Okay. So overachievers are after recognition, but because it's the only strategy they have, it's a really brutal strategy. And I remember working with a client many years ago who had this issue, and she was absolutely brilliant. But she herself didn't think she was actually brilliant. But what she did was work harder than everybody else. And Sunday was the day that she hated the most. She dreaded and hated Sundays with all her heart and soul, because on Sundays she had to put a tremendous amount of work in so that she was always ahead of everybody for the rest of the week. So it was the biggest amount of work for her on that day, and that's how she lived. And the pressure that she put herself under was such a high degree, and that everything she did, she overachieved in. Finally, it came to a head, and she did something that we all do, which is self-sabotaged. And the self-sabotage was spectacular. And she went through a spectacular failure as a result. So she was no longer able to get her need met for recognition through being brilliant and overachieving, because she had failed spectacularly. And after that came a suicide attempt, because all of her identity, all of her ability to get her need met was dependent upon overachieving. But she wasn't getting her need met because she was exhausting herself and burning herself out, and she was chasing an elusive goal. Because instead of being recognized, she was kind of hated, because she was always, it was more important to her to be ahead of everyone than to be liked. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what she was getting was the opposite of what she wanted. She was disliked. Everyone was jealous.
Yeah.
Because she was better than everybody at everything. And it was so important to her to be better at everything that she didn't make herself likable.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
the competition was too intense.
Yeah.
It was very unpleasant.
Yeah.
But this reversal, I mean, this is just it's so important to know what we need, but it's so difficult. It's so difficult to admit what we need, because once we admit what we need, we're so vulnerable, because we believe that we can't get it met. And that's why we suppress it, and that's why we deny it, and that's why we try to pretend that we don't have a need, because we're so afraid that we can't get it met. We don't know how to ask. We don't know how to get it met.
Yeah.
And that's why we, have affairs and self-sabotage and so forth, because we believe we can't get our need met. And so the first step is, okay, what do you need? You just have to tell the truth, because the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into this more in this episode.
Right. So we've gone into our definition of needs, which are beautiful and good. And we've talked a little bit about strategies. Mostly we've talked about unfortunate strategies that get us the opposite of what we want.
Yeah.
So now let's pivot and start talking about what do we do differently here?
How do we get our needs met?
How do we get our needs met? Exactly. So there's 3 different points that we want to touch on here that are very important in the realm of getting our needs met.
Yeah.
And these are requests, demands, and leaving the other free.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
let's dive into these one by one.
Okay. Well, let's start with demands.
Okay.
So again, the area of strategy is a minefield of problems, and we typically are not very good at asking to get our needs met because it's not typically a part of how we operate in any culture, like certainly not in New Zealand where I grew up. And because in New Zealand you don't really have needs because, having needs means you're needy, and that's just weird. So you don't have, or you can have safe needs that are safe. Like, I need to go to the pub. You want to join me? We have a lot of pubs in New Zealand, and I need a drink. We have a lot of drinking in New Zealand. That's totally perfectly acceptable. So demands, let's talk about demands. So what can happen is we have a need. We don't ask to get it met. The need grows more urgent until we get desperate. And then we have to ask, but the other person is not allowed to say no because we're desperate, and something's got to give. And the answer, and no is not an acceptable answer. So what do? We demand. We make sure it happens one way or another.
Right.
And a demand, it doesn't mean you're like, you must do it. I mean, that's one way we can demand, but we can also emotionally demand without saying a word. So for instance, did you ever grow up with a mother or a father who managed to communicate merely through their emotions by emoting something that they needed from you, and they're not going to tell you what it is, and they're not going to make it easy for you. You have to guess, but if you don't figure it out and comply, you're in trouble.
And the emotions will get bigger and bigger and bigger and fill up the whole room.
Yes, and everyone,
until you know.
Yes, and everyone is revolving around that little emoting person.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's, it's very manipulative.
Right.
And that's another way to demand.
Yeah. Another one is like falling apart, like falling to pieces in tears and just becoming like a puddle of, pathetic sadness. And, what is someone going to do with that?
Yeah,
you feel... Most people will feel obligated to, do whatever to take care of this, mess.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways that we can go about demanding to get our needs met, without being very functional about it. So demanding to get our needs met obviously is, if we can grow out of that, that would be fantastic. And if we could do something else instead, and that would be to make a request. But it's hard to make a request if we don't know what our needs are. Or let's say we do. Let's say we're like, okay, I know that I need connection, but I'm terrified to ask to get this need met. I know that I need something from my boss, but I'm terrified to ask for it. Because if they say no, I've just blown it. Or if they say no, I can't get this really, really deeply important need met, and then I'm out of luck. It would be terrible. It's a terrible situation. So risky, kind of thing. It's high stakes.
Yeah.
So I get that. I have that experience of like asking for connection. It's really hard for me. I'm getting better at it, but it was really hard for me at first because it's not how I operated growing up. It's not how my family operated, and I don't think it's a part of New Zealand culture. Whereas Americans, I thought, and this is certainly my experience of Americans, is that it's much easier culturally for Americans to be affectionate and warm and appreciative and all those lovely connecting things, where New Zealanders are very friendly and funny, but that's not how we tend to connect. So that's, I think, maybe one of the reasons why I'm here, is because I just love that part. I've just such a need for that kind of warmth and, effusive appreciation that Americans are so good at, and I married a Leo. He's such a Leo, such a heart person. But it's a very vulnerable place for me to actually say to my husband, I need you, like, I would love it if we could connect.
Yeah.
Can you take the time out of your very busy work schedule to invest in me? Like, it's really hard for me to ask that of him. So the first step is the minefield of connecting to what you actually need, and the terror that can be there, admitting what you need.
Yeah.
And then the next minefield is asking to get your need met. And that's where the request comes in. The request is making the ask in a very, very clear way. So not in a general way, not in a mitigated way, not in a way that can be misunderstood
or is overly
ignored,
emotional
or demanding. But to make a request, and a healthy request looks like this. You ask a question, would you be willing? That's my favorite way to ask. Would you be willing? Would you be willing to take 3 hours off work tonight and just be with me, and we can talk about this thing I really want to talk about? Would you be willing? So then the next part of it is being specific about what you're asking, so that the other person knows what they're saying yes or no to. If it's too general, then they don't know what they're saying yes to, and they might just have to say no, because they're like, no, I don't know what that is. No, So specific.
Or they'll say yes and then disappoint.
Exactly.
Because you end up with these broad agreements that are too much to hold.
Everybody has a different idea of what was actually meant.
Yeah.
Someone's going to get disappointed in that scenario. So get very specific. And if you can be specific about time, that'd be great. So instead of saying, would you be willing to, in the future, not do that thing again? That's so unspecific, and there's no time to it. Instead, if you could say something like, would you be willing to meet with me on Wednesday at 2:00 to have a conversation about this thing that we this little piece of conflict we had, or something.
Yeah.
And the third piece about making a request is that you ask for what you want or need, but not what you don't want. Don't say, would you be willing to not do the thing, or not do that again, or whatever, but instead, would you be willing to, instead of yelling at me, sit down with me on Wednesday at 2:00 and tell me what you actually want from me? Right? So, and this works really well with children too, by the way. If you have a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, don't tell them what you don't, and also with animals, don't tell them what you don't want them to do, because they'll just automatically do it.
It's so true. They hear what you're saying. Yeah. And, if you say, don't pick up this glass of water, they
just can't hear
just
themselves.
Pick up the glass of water. That's what is registering for them.
Exactly. They can't help themselves. Yeah.
Instead of put your hands on your lap, or, there's all kinds of ways. I have a 2-year-old, so there's all kinds of creative ways you can learn to, state what you want.
Yes. And it's a really fantastic discipline in communication to develop, because it forces you to be truthful. It forces you to be truthful about what you need. This is very good for you. It's very good for you to be truthful about what you need. And even in the request, you're showing up in honor of what you need. It's a self-respect. Maybe we could call it that.
It's honoring.
Yes, honoring. Yes. And So there's another aspect to all of this, and this is the third point. The first one was what a demand is, and we need to steer clear of making demands of others. What a request is, and what the components of a request are. The third thing we want to talk about is freedom. Yeah? So a really important part of the art of how we hold the social space, the space between us and how we're holding this, is the goal of the art form of the social realm, or the social arts, maybe is a better way to put it, is the freedom.
Mm-hmm. And leave the other free.
Yes, and ourselves as well. We become more free with truth-telling and connecting to our needs and being honest with ourselves. And we leave the other free by leaving them free to say no or yes. And we do that by making a request and not a demand. Mm-hmm. So motive is a very important part where we're freeing ourselves and we're freeing the other. And this is interesting because motive touches on a word that most people will have an aversion to. So I'm sorry about this, just apologizing in advance. But it's really important that we have a sense of morality. And I think most people do, when they're carrying each other and caring for each other and loving each other, right? There's a morality in that. But we can take it a lot further because we can become transparent to our own motives for doing what we do, saying what we say, using the strategies that we use. And noticing when we're making a demand instead of leaving the other free to say no to our request. Mm-hmm. So are you able to hear a no when you make your request? Mm-hmm. And if you're not okay with a no, then you're not making a request.
Yeah.
And I say this with a lot of sympathy because I don't like hearing no, because I am the first to admit that I can wait until I'm desperate before I'll finally ask to get my needs met. This is what I learned how to do. And I'm going on 50 and I still have a hard time breaking that habit.
Yeah.
So we're all in this together. However, being able to connect to our motive for, that lies behind our strategy is very freeing. And it enables us to find a place in our heart where we can hear the no. As painful and as uncomfortable as that can be, we can still hear and honor a no. Mm-hmm. And just say, I wish you had said yes, but okay, I can accept it because I'm holding myself to a higher standard and I want you to be free. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I trust that there are many ways for me to get my needs met.
There are other ways.
There are, yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's take a break and then come back and get into more stories and examples and more about needs.
Awesome.
Okay.
Would you like a serious solution to your people problems? One that is deep and lasting? Would you like to be able to raise the quality of interactions you have with the people in your life and work? Most people believe that the solution to ongoing people problems, such as conflict and misunderstanding, is memorizing the right thing to say or some other clever tactic. However, there are always situations where such tactics simply won't apply or succeed. Instead, you need something that can help you be present and generative in every interaction, every moment, no matter how unexpected or difficult or how high the stakes are. The truth is, you can shape the interactions you have merely through the quality of your presence. Unfortunately, an authentic and elevated quality of presence doesn't come easily or naturally any more than playing the violin does, because it's a trained and honed way of being. Like a master of Tai Chi, you can learn to work with the social spaces between you and others, not with manipulation, nor with dominance or force, but with a greater freedom, greater understanding and generosity, and a stronger presence of mind. Imagine having the kind of presence that commands respect, not because you're the alpha, but because others rise to meet you there. Imagine attracting in your life and work the kinds of high-functioning relationships that you long for. Magenta Academy for the Social Arts has developed a path to help you grow an elevated presence. Join the Elevated Presence Masterclass, where you will begin building a foundation for transforming your relationships. Enrollment opens soon, don't miss out. Go to magenta.fm/elevated presence to get on the waitlist.
Okay, so let's get into some more examples and stories of needs.
You got some?
We actually taught this to a leadership team at a company that I was running. Louisa taught it. And we did a whole training with everyone in the company at all levels. And it really was a game changer for the team as in terms of how everyone sort of learned to operate and operate out of like a different shared language. There was one guy who kind of a gruff guy.
Yeah.
And I remember him commenting like, this is great for my marriage. It really did. It really, had an impact.
Wow. Cool.
But on my leadership team, the people that I was working with, very closely on a day-to-day basis, we made a really strong point to, implement this in terms of touching into what we need. And it was very helpful for me as a leader.
Yeah.
To
say more about that.
Learn more about what people were needing. One thing I learned was that people needed more acknowledgement than I was giving.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and it wasn't out of, that I wasn't appreciating them. It was just, it's a high, fast-paced startup environment. And I would just see these people as like these amazing, wonderful people in my team I was so grateful for. And I just didn't even know that, they needed me to say that, express that more than I was.
Right.
So I was very glad to hear that need from people and be able to meet that need for acknowledgement.
Yeah, so easy.
Yeah, so easy. Yeah. And, if we didn't have these tools, I'm not sure how, if we didn't have this shared language, I don't know if they would have
known how to ask.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one example, learning that in a team sort of dynamic. And then, using this shared language at home is also very useful and important. I noticed that one need that comes up for me again and again as a mom and in my role as a mom is the need to be seen by my spouse. Motherhood is such an invisible labor.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's such a labor of love. And I do love being a mother. And I just give so much to my children.
Yeah.
And, sometimes I'll start having some feelings coming up and, using the tools that we teach in the school to help really get, down to what is the real need that is driving this, and a lot of times it's just a need to be seen.
Isn't it interesting?
And if I can articulate that to my spouse, he's so happy to meet that need.
Right.
It's the same as on the
so
team,
easy.
It's just like,
wow.
of course he wants to acknowledge it. And, it's not that he's doesn't do a good job of that.
Right.
It's just
he didn't know.
Yeah. Exactly. And then another example that I want to dive into a little bit is holding the needs of the household. And it can be an area that they can point to this and say it's the reason that they got divorced.
Yeah. Right.
What is happening in those situations? Did they just pick terrible people? Or are there some unfortunate strategies, being held? There's so much that can go awry when you're wanting to, when you're needing to hold the needs of the household.
Yeah, because otherwise it's the straw that breaks the camel's back, meaning irreconcilable differences, meaning divorce, right? Or being fired or resigning because you just see no other way forward. And this is such a loss for everyone. You know, divorce is such a loss for not just obviously for the couple, but I know, you know, as friends of mine have divorced, it's really sad. Also for the friends and the community,
because, and the children, of course,
and the children. It's devastating. You know, Jeff is his parents divorced when he was 13, and my parents didn't. I've never been through a divorce, but obviously, more than 50% of couples end up in divorce, so it's everywhere. You know, yes. And so how do we get there? Well, I mean, of course, there's a 100 reasons, million reasons, you know, a different reason for every couple. Communication breakdown is a very big part of it, because we don't connect to our needs, and then we don't know how to ask to get them met. And if we do ask to get them met, our strategies are so unfortunate that they are corrosive, because they get us the reversal of what we actually want.
Right.
So of course they're going to be corrosive.
Like letting our frustration build up to the point where it's at so much resentment that
we explode.
Yeah. Or we get disdainful.
Yes, disdainful. Yes, and it's just rampant with projection. And the reason why it becomes irreconcilable is because the layers of projection are so thick that, and there is not a capacity to own the projection. And so this is something, and this is the reason why you and I have started a school, and why the school is really focused on practice. And so in all of our, you know, current offerings and all the future offerings that we've got in our minds and got on our, you know, sticky notes and plans and all that, they all are focused on practice. They're like, okay, how can we get people into practice? You know, that's all we think about.
Yeah. And communication is one area that you have to practice.
Yeah. And don't think that you can be good at something. Like, I realize that we're communicating all the time, but that does not mean that we're good at it, because we have to learn how to practice specific things, right, to become good at something. And it's weird. Communication is so weird because we're doing it all the time, you'd think we're practicing it and we'd be good at it, but no.
You probably suck if you're not practicing.
We're sorry to say, but chances are you suck.
Yeah.
And you're going
if you're nice.
Even if you're lovely. You know, because chances are you're mitigated, you're not clear, you don't know how to make clear requests, you don't know how to speak before you get desperate, you're not connected to your needs, you don't really know what you're feeling, you project. We all project, all of us, every single one of us, until we learn not to.
Yeah.
That is the unnatural work, or the work against nature that Carl Jung talks about. We naturally project. Let's put it that way. And then we have to take this extraordinary effort. It's not extraordinary as in really difficult. I just mean it's not what people normally do.
Right.
But we can take a practice of owning our projection. Now, what does that mean? That means owning what we feel and owning what we need. That is owning the projection, because the reason why we get into such minefields, I guess is my favorite analogy, sorry, this episode, in you know, relationship that ends in divorce is because we don't know how to connect with our needs. I'm just repeating myself throughout this episode because it's I cannot overemphasize how important this is. We don't know how to connect to our needs, and we don't know how to ask for what we need. And in fact, if you are if this is resonating with you, we have on our website a free download. We just ask for your email if that's okay. But in exchange for your email address, you get a free download. And what it is it's talking all about forbidden needs, which are very important for us to connect to, and very freeing if we can connect to them. The most potent ones are the ones where we believe they're forbidden. Connect to those, and all kinds of goodness can start to come into your life. And there's a journaling exercise that comes with it. It's a little guidebook, just, walking you through some concepts, and then a journaling exercise where you can have a go at connecting to those. So we walk you like step by step into a process where you can connect to those particularly forbidden needs. And you can do the journaling exercise over and over again. Like you don't have to do it once and done. So, I just, that's just a free gift for you if you're interested in this topic.
Yeah. So when we are able to connect to our needs and not project our resentment or our, deep beliefs that it can't be met or that we don't deserve for it to be met, if we can own all of that and build the capacity to hold space for the other person's need, then out of that, there's so much creative problem solving and solutions that can come, because I know that it is tough to meet a lot of needs when you are married and you have children.
Yeah.
We have a teenager and 2 little ones.
Yeah.
And I'm, mostly stay at home with the kids, but I also work, obviously.
Yeah.
And my husband works, and so I have my needs for support and, time for my work. And he has his needs for freedom and fun and, play. And we have to hold all of these. And if we hold them together in a gesture that we love one another, we love our children, we love our family, and we want to see everyone's needs get met, then we, can come up with really good, creative solutions. I will say, of course, there are sacrifices we make as parents. We all do. My husband doesn't get to play as much volleyball as he would if we didn't have children, and don't have time to read as much as I would if I didn't have little ones, and that's part of us holding it together.
Yeah. Well, you touched on something important in there, which is beliefs. So, at the risk of going a little too deep, too fast. Nevertheless, it's so important that people don't stop at needs, because there's other forces that drive what we need, and it's really important that we also get to know those forces. And one of them is beliefs. So remember what I said earlier about we believe that we can't get a need met. So if we believe that we can't get a need met, then we can suppress all knowledge of that need. We can also deny, right? So we deny that there's a need there. And we can put a lot of resistance up around that need. And it can create all kinds of confusion about our behaviors. For instance, self-sabotage can come in, or sabotage of any kind can come in. But definitely resentment and anger. And it's very difficult for us to know where those feelings and those particular strategies and behaviors are coming from, because we have a belief that is operating in us. And so don't just stop. Like, as you do your process of self-inquiry, like with this journaling exercise on our website in that guidebook called Forbidden Needs, you don't have to stop at needs. You can go a little bit deeper and say, okay, what do I believe about my need? Do I believe that I can't get it met? Do I believe that it's not okay or forbidden? Do I believe that the world is a particular way in relation to my need? Like, what is the story there around what you believe?
Yeah.
So I kind of want to throw that in there, because it's actually not something that nonviolent communication touches on very much, if at all.
Right.
And yet it is such a strong, important driving force behind so much of what we need and what we feel, and what we think, and what we conclude, and what we project onto others. So it's kind of like a hierarchy. You know, we have strategies. We have feelings right under that. We have needs right under that. And we have beliefs right under that. There you have a cross-section or a taxonomy of the driving forces behind your strategies.
Right, right. A belief about a need could really come from the shadow or from our compulsion. You know,
Yeah.
we could be, we can easily confuse, we can easily confuse a need with a sort of a compulsive reaction.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Or name something as a need. It's really coming out of our shadow.
Oh, yeah, let's talk about that. Because don't conflate needs with addiction.
Yes.
So an addiction, I have a very broad definition of addiction because in my world, you can be addicted to thoughts. You can be addicted to beliefs. If you believe that the world is against you or that the world is ruled by indifferent gods, or you believe that you can't get your need met, but everything, that belief is driving so much about you and your behaviors, that is definitely a wound.
Yeah.
That resides in the shadow self. Now, if you don't know what we mean by that word, you should go listen to episode 2 where we really get into the definitions, because we're not going to describe the definitions today because that'll just take too long. So please do go back to episode 2. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So, and this is good because remember when we said that needs are good, true, and beautiful? Well, a need, don't conflate a need with addiction. So let's call an addiction in this context a belief. You believe something. You're addicted. You believe in that belief. You're addicted to that belief.
Yeah.
And what we can do is get very inflexible about it. This is just the way that it is. This is just the way that the world is, okay? I know this to be true. And I think one clue that you have about whether, first of all, because you would say something like that, this is just the way that it is. That's just a sure sign that you have a compulsive belief operating in you that may not be true. And that comes out of a wounded place, a hurt place that needs attending to, that needs healing, and absolutely deserves that attending to.
Yeah. Or touching on the belief that that the world is not going to meet your needs.
Yes. That you can't get your needs met.
You can't get your needs met. Because that is going to color exactly
so much.
How you, if you even dare make a request of this world that doesn't want to meet your needs, which why would you do such a thing?
Yeah.
But even if you do get, drum up the courage to ask, it will likely be in such a mitigated form that the other person can barely even tell.
Yeah.
They can't even hear that you're making a request whatsoever.
Yeah, that's sabotage.
Yeah.
That's a setup right there. Yeah, so that's really an important point. And let me just say that if you are a child of parents who were not able to meet your emotional needs, they loved you, but they couldn't see you, that is a really perfect setup for believing that you can't get your needs met as an adult. And that is a very, very painful way to walk through life, is to believe you can't get your needs met. And there's a lot of suffering arises out of that. Yeah. Because let me just be a bit more specific. You believe that you can't get your needs met in love relationships specifically. That's what we do is we look for our parents. I mean, I'm sure this is well known amongst most people, that you look for your parents in your love partners, totally unconsciously, right? And there's elements in there because you're trying to find healing. This is a supra-conscious activity at work in you. Your shadow, your super, as well as your superconscious, are drawn to the thing that you bump up against in the other person. And there's a calling to heal in that karmic event, right? So if you know that you are someone who did not get your emotional needs met as a child, or you wonder if that might be the case, then I would highly recommend that you spend some introspective time going through this hierarchy. Think about a time when there's a trigger, an event where you were triggered, and then look at where, what feelings came up that are always clues to unmet needs, the negative feelings. Obviously, we're not talking about joy because joy is an indicator that you're getting your needs met. So we're after negative feelings. They're clues to help guide you toward. They're very good information about unmet needs in you. And see if you can figure out what are those unmet needs. Now, we're going to put in the show notes a link to a list of needs words. So print that list out and go through every single word and mark which one resonates with you or rings a bell for you. Just get a list.
Yeah, it's so helpful. When we did that training at our company, we had those lists posted in a couple different places.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So referencing those lists in the beginning can be really helpful.
Yeah. It's like learning a new language. Yeah. You've got to learn the vocabulary.
Yeah.
And typically when we start out, especially around feelings, because feelings is another part of the language. We haven't talked about it in this episode and we'll get to it eventually, but there's a lot of words. Normally we work with 4: anger, sadness, grief. That's it, right? Yeah. That's all we know. But there's actually, 30 or 40 in the English language. There's so many that we could use. And as we become more fluent in this realm, it's enormously helpful because what happens, instead of becoming more emotional, which you might be afraid might happen, actually what happens is our feeling life becomes more refined. It becomes more nuanced. It can actually even become an organ of perception. It can help create in us a more accurate intuition than we had before. So there's a lot of benefit and a lot of capacity building that can happen in learning this new language that may be very unexpected. Anyway, I'm just going to leave that there. Yeah. So coming back to what we were saying before, the reason why we want to connect with these beliefs is because the truth will set you free. If you know what the beliefs are that are operating in you and you sit with it, then that new self-knowledge can start to work in you. And you can start to observe the phenomena of the consequences of this belief playing out in your life. And now you start to have a choice about what you do, where you intervene. Mm-hmm. You can have a fighting chance of healing from the addiction. And
healing from the addiction to your beliefs.
Yes.
Yes. To
and
these
that's
thoughts
what we're
that
after.
You carry around everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere you go. Because how you do one thing is how you do everything. Mm-hmm. And so much of this is unconscious that drives us. And it's time, as we've said before, and we'll say again, it's time to get you back in the driver's seat of your life and of what happens to you, how you internalize what happens to you. You know, imagine walking through life with the ability to flow and to improvise in ways that actually attain to your highest good, instead of being destructive or annihilating or terrible.
Or just not achieving and not reaching what you could reach.
Yes.
Not contributing what you could contribute.
Yeah, exactly.
If you were getting your needs met.
Yes.
And living from your highest self.
It's just incredibly liberating. It's incredibly liberating, and that's what we're after.
Yeah. There's the one point that that Marshall, the creator of NVC, made in that people typically want to meet a need.
Yeah.
And I remember that that really sticking with me early on, and I was times where I needed to remind myself of that before
that's true.
going into a request, that you may have a belief that that people don't want to meet your needs, or that you're going to be needy or too much. Because a lot of us do grow up with these kinds of beliefs.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that he said, people want to meet your need.
Yeah.
People want to be helpful. People want to serve.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's absolutely true. Thank you for bringing that up. That is a really good point. But I just want to circle back to this needs versus strategies to make sure that this is really landing. The difference between a need and a strategy.
Okay, so say there's a need for some transparency or clarity in a department of an organization.
Yeah.
And so the head of that department says to the department, okay, we need to fill out this spreadsheet every day. And this is what the department needs to function. And we can't function without this spreadsheet. And everyone working in the department is like, that is a huge waste of time. And then they just get into this argument about the spreadsheet. Or maybe they don't explicitly argue, they implicitly argue, or they say, okay, and then they go off and complain about this terrible idea and this stupid spreadsheet that they hate and is ruining their life.
And they get passive aggressive and don't fill it out.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
But the spreadsheet was really just there to meet a need for transparency or data.
Right.
And the people on the team may actually have a lot of other strategies to meet that need for transparency that are more efficient,
better designed,
more intuitive. Yes, exactly. The spreadsheet is the strategy. But it's being called the need, we need the spreadsheet.
Right, exactly. So that's conflation of need and strategy. And so I hope that you grok, that you really understand the difference between these two things, because in communication, it's essential. It's very key, because if you can get to the need and you can recognize the strategy that you've been using, then you have a choice about what strategy you can use, and then you can get creative about different ways to get your need met than just this one way, Yeah. So that's it, really.
Yeah. So needs and strategies, differentiating. This is the essential.
Yes.
I'll just recap some other aspects that we went over today. We talked about the difference between a request and a demand.
Yes.
And we gave some examples of different ways that people make demands that don't always look like a, open outward assertion of you must do this.
Right.
There's lots of other more subversive ways that we demand, like emoting and falling apart.
Yes. I love the falling apart one.
And then we gave the alternative of making a request and went into a few attributes of what makes a request truly a request. Like, are you willing, or how would it be for you to X, Y, and Z? Framing it in a way that leaves the other person free to say no, being very specific, ideally with some time
element to it.
Yes, exactly.
And the third one is saying what you want, not what you don't want.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yep.
And then the importance of freedom and how vital that is for us in trying to co-create together and working in any kind of relationship.
Yeah.
In the social arts.
Yes. As social artists, freedom is essential.
Yes. And then the shadow and compulsion and our addictions and how those can sometimes be masquerading as needs when they're not.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we went into beliefs, which is sort of a missing piece of NVC, or a piece that that Magenta has built into NVC, the beliefs that are driving our needs. That are beliefs that are about the beliefs we hold about whether or not we can get our needs met, or which ones we can get met and which ones we can't, and how we can get them met.
Yeah. And the beliefs driving the needs, which drive the feelings, which drive the strategies. So there's a hierarchy in there, or a taxonomy of how this plays out.
Yeah. And there's a lot of methods and tools that we teach in the school that really get people into practice of going through this. Yeah. In a very structured way. Yeah. And then the last thing that we'll touch on is the ebook or download that's on the website, magenta.fm.
It's called Forbidden Needs.
Yes. Yeah. Forbidden Needs. So you can go download that.
Right now.
Yeah. It's a good read.
Yeah.
Okay. And as always, like and subscribe and comment.
Yes, please. Yeah, we want to hear what you think. We want to hear what came up for you. Anything that was confusing, we really need to know.
Yeah, maybe there's some scenarios that come up that you think this just doesn't apply to the scenario. Right. Send it to us.
Yeah, we want to see it.
Yeah. So you can always comment in the comment section. You can also reach us at hello@magenta.fm, and we will see you in the next episode.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.